Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be here with you today as the representative of the European Commission and the Directorate General Research and Innovation, which is the service in charge of management of research projects such as GRACE, and importantly also funding this project. I can say that I took over the task of being the project officer from already two colleagues. So this is an interesting exercise also from my perspective, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. So I will give some comments, and my presentation, I will not show any slides, but it will be available after the meeting in a written form, so it will be available. Well, basically what we can say is that the European Union has a very solid legal framework for GMO authorization, which is periodically reviewed to ensure that the latest standards of innovation and safety as regards human and animal health and the environment are applied. Each application for a GMO authorization is assessed by a European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, as we have heard in this conference already, and also by the member states. EFSA, it is important to recall, is an independent agency charged with ensuring safety and food and feed in Europe. It is funded by the EU budget and operates separately from the European Commission, European Parliament and EU member states. EFSA has a GMO panel, among others, working on risk assessment. The legal framework, and in particular the associated risk assessment, are science-based and have significantly benefited from the EU-funded research activities on GMOs. Since 1982, the European Commission has funded some 130 research projects in the GMO domain with about 300 million euros. These projects involved more than 500 independent research groups, and the results have been published and are available for consultation. The main aspects covered by the research projects involved crop improvement and agricultural sustainability, developing analytical tools and methods for detecting GMOs in food and feed, developing assessment tools and approaches for potential health and environmental impacts of GMOs, managing gene flow, gene transfer, and coexistence of GMOs and not GMOs, and assessing effects of GMO on biodiversity. One of the conclusions from all these studies published by the European Commission in 2010 is that GM plants are per se not any riskier than their non-GM counterparts. And I can show this booklet. I'm sure you're aware of it. It is available online, so this is free for consultation as well, with a summary of some of these 2 decades of EU-funded GMO research. Under the present European Research and Innovation Framework Programme Horizon 2020, the Commission, in collaboration with the Member States, will continue to address the public concerns raised in regard to GMOs, in particular for the GM crops. A concrete example of this approach is a topic on GMO research, which is an ERANET and part of joint action towards public-public partnership in the bioeconomy, which is included in the current open Horizon 2020 work program for 2016 and 17. Importantly, this topic requests taking into account both risks and also benefits of GMOs, including safeguarding the possibility of using GMOs for the benefit of society in terms of increased sustainability, protection of biodiversity, and enhancing animal welfare. Another very relevant example of ongoing EU-funded research in this field is provided by the two projects assessing the added value and sustainability of compulsory animal feeding trials, which form part of a health risk assessment for GM food and feed. One of these projects is GRACE, which is the focus of this present final conference. And I will give some more comments on the project at the end of my talk just today. The other complementary project, which we already heard some about, is called GTwist, which will continue work until April 2018. This project is developing guidance for conducting and interpreting long-term animal toxicity studies with genetically modified maize NK603 and analyzes the relevance and scientific value of such studies. We will also hear about this and other related projects in the next session. It is expected that the results of these projects will allow responsible authorities to better assess the currently applicable risk assessment requirements for the authorization of GM food and feed in the EU. Scientific excellence, independence, and transparency are the main guiding principle of these studies. One broader question we should ask is how do we ensure that the EU regulatory framework for GMO is not a barrier for innovation and competitiveness. It is obvious that the innovative potential of biotechnology can significantly contribute to the competitiveness of Europe. However, it is also important that this innovation is always underpinned by safety considerations and response to public needs and concerns. It is also important that the social and ethical dimensions of these new technologies are taken seriously along the responsible research and innovation approach which is advocated by the Commission. Following this approach, the potential implications and societal expectations with regard to research and innovation are anticipated and assessed, and the new technologies developed with transparency, openness, and responsibility. The main objective in developing programs on GMO safety was to respond with scientific evidence to legitimate public concerns and to the need to provide policymakers with sound science on which to base their decisions. At the same time, results from several EU-funded projects suggest that GM crops could contribute to the improvement of agricultural production and global food security. GM crops could provide opportunities to reduce malnutrition, especially in less developed countries, to increase yields and to support agriculture's adaptation to climate change. Possible positive impacts on food quality and nutrient compositions have also been shown. More recently, research interest has shifted towards exploring the potential of GMOs in areas other than food crops, such as including development of novel sources of biomass and bioenergy, as well as plant molecular farming. One concrete example of this approach in the EU-funded program has been the development of rapid plant-based production of animal vaccines for important diseases of livestock, such as avian influenza and blue tongue disease. However, in order to realize this potential, it will be necessary to address concerns among some European citizens and NGOs about the potential environmental and health impacts of GM crops. These concerns have had in the past a strong impact on the use of GM food for humanitarian aid. It should be recalled that GM technology is already widely deployed outside the EU, among the main EU agricultural trade partners, such as US, Brazil, Argentina. Just to recall that last year, a record acreage of some 180 million hectares of biotech crops were grown globally at the annual growth rate of between 3 to 4%. Actually, last year, 2014, was the 19th consecutive year of commercialization. And during this period, we can see that growth continued every single year. And notably in the 18 years, 12 years have seen the growth in the double digits. The main biotech crops are maize, soya, cotton, and rice. Thus, in reality, the global food and feed supply is already largely dependent on GM crops. The European market relies on import of GM commodities, for instance, for animal feed. In fact, more than 60% of EU needs in vegetable proteins for cattle are met through imports of soya and soy meal from third countries where GMO cultivation is widespread. Given the growing share of GM crops, it can be expected that European food security based on purely non-GM approach will result in significantly higher prices and costs for European consumers and European industry. Ensuring the safety of these widely used GM crops through adequate assessment tools is therefore very important from a consumer perspective. This brings me back to the GRACE project. I'm very pleased to say that I was able to participate in the 2 previous stakeholder workshops organized by the project only a few weeks ago in Vienna. In my view, the workshops confirmed that the project is and has been committed to a fully dedicated stakeholder involvement. This is also confirmed, I can say, by the present event. And this is well documented from the early stages of a project and involving all relevant actors. Indeed, the level of attention given to building trust among the stakeholders is crucial for the necessary dialogue and involvement. Generally speaking, the implementation of a project appears fully effective and professional, with the experimental methodology following appropriate international guidelines, such as ones of OECD and EFSA. The results have been made available to all interested parties or published in peer-reviewed journals, and more is expected to come, as we have heard during the yesterday, first day of the conference. This confirms a commitment to openness and transparency. It is now up to the scientific community to discuss different findings in an open debate, and this process is already ongoing. Finally, it can be expected that the conclusions and recommendations, when final, when they are published, should be taken into account by the policymakers for science-based policymaking, both at the level of member states and also at the level of European Union in general. Thank you very much for your attention.